That's why we're spending so much time talking about that, because a lot of people are dealing with this right now, because we have, like Joel Salatin says, record numbers of people leaning into this homestead tsunami because they see the signs of the times. What's up, y'all? Billy and the Homestead Honey coming back once again from Perma Pastures Farm. Before we get into it, want to remind you, this Friday and Saturday, this weekend coming up and the following weekend, we have a pig processing, probably going to be the last one we do this year. Details down below. All right, so this video, it's more exciting than what you're thinking right now. Let me just kind of set the stage, and you would have to go back to watch a previous video. We're in the area that was absolutely choked with a bunch of trees. The proximity was too close, and it still is in a lot of areas. It's still a work in progress. William came through, marked them. Remember, he took a page out of Joel Salatin's book where you go about chest high, figure the diameter, double that number, and convert it to feet, and then you clear everything around that tree that you want to clear. Go back and watch that video if you want better details on that. Okay, so that was done. But prior to that, this area we're sitting in, it was nothing more but briars, thorns, thickets, all the things, the last things you ever want to see, especially in a forest setting. Now, what does that tell us right off the bat when you see stuff like that, Michelle? What did you determine, and what did we determine collectively just by seeing those things out there?
Yeah, our soil is messed up, and we're working on fixing our soil.
Well, the reason it was messed up, we'll go into the reasons. Number one, the previous owners had a ton of cattle out here. They destroyed a lot of stuff. Well, what else do cattle do if you're not careful? A whole lot of compaction.
Right. They went, the cattle visited the same areas repeatedly. There was no letting the land rest. It's just, there's some areas on this property that are severely compacted because they just stomped the area.
So what does that also tell us? Where you have high compaction, you probably have anaerobic conditions, which means the things that thrive in an anaerobic setting are the things that take over. Am I wrong?
Right, and they're the opposite. You want aerobic conditions and the life that goes along with that. You don't want anaerobic bacteria.
All right, so we're just gonna kind of look this way, and the first thing you'll notice, you see some stumps that we'll deal with later. You'll see a lot of, fallen trees and trees misstructured, all those things. But let me tell you what you see on the bottom there that you didn't see before. That, ladies and gentlemen, is grass. And the only reason that's happened, number one, we opened up the canopy, which was 90% William, opened up that canopy, and we're getting sunlight through there. But that doesn't necessarily mean that what's coming up is going to be your best friend, because certainly it isn't. So we have a combination, because we're looking at things as a combination of the grass that we want, along with the pioneer species or weeds that we don't want. Let's just kind of drift on over here for a second, and I'll give you a real good example of what it is I'm talking about. Okay, right over here is the demarcation point, basically where my property ends and my neighbor starts in this particular area. If you look over here, what do you see? Thorns, thickets. I mean, I don't need to go through the species and stuff. I just need to know generally what's over there. And then beyond it is a bunch of Chinese silvergrass, which Michelle basically, in her genius, kind of figured out that thing really hates two things. Number one, it hates shade. Number two, it hates fungal dominant systems. So where we've taken this very bacterial dominant system, where all these weeds and everything else were popping up, we're turning it into, look at all the leaf litter over here. You see some thorns and thickets coming up, but nowhere near what it was there before. So the idea is opening up the canopy, bringing the animals through, which in this case are sheep and chickens. We're letting them go through, and we're letting them, of course, do what they do. They're going to eat what's there, but also taking that other dog to the hunt in the form of Greg Judy, where we put out a bunch of hay, let them eat it. What they don't eat, they're going to stomp in, but it's also creating a carbon layer, which is feeding what?
It's feeding the fungal, but you're also covering your soil, because a lot of this soil is exposed, and it's just getting like just baked by the suns, which is causing even more compaction.
And it's creating also, every time the rain comes from the sky,
Right,
it's hitting bare soil, creating even more compaction, which means your water, instead of holding on to your property, it's just going to run on down to the Mississippi. All right, let's go back over here and we'll show you some of the remedial methods we've taken. This, believe it or not, is quite improved as to what it was. Nothing but thorns, thickets, vines, brambles. Everything with a thorn generally is an open indication that you got problems, nephew. So you can see the recovery already. Even though we have a fair number of places up here that still have this bare soil, which we're correcting. So even though it's at that vegetative time of year, we are still putting out hay, not when they're out in the pasture, but when they come up in these woods, we're putting out hay, even straw, anything we can get our hands on in the form of carbon to put down on that soil. But here's something else that Michelle came up with, which once again, my dear, this is why she's a homestead honey, y'all, because she has brilliant, wonderful, phenomenal ideas. And what was one of those many great ideas that you came up with?
Well, the idea was to plant comfrey just throughout the whole pasture, because we had a ton of crowns that we had to do something with. So instead of us harvesting the comfrey and taking it to the animals, we just planted it throughout the pasture. But the hard part was finding areas where it wasn't so compacted that it's just gonna stunt the growth, because a lot of these areas they're just really hard ground. So I just picked areas where the ground was soft, and as you can see over here, there was a tree that's fallen, and the ground here was very soft. So I planted a bunch through here, and you can see it coming up.
But we find out also whether the ground's soft or not, it's just going to slow down your comfrey. It'll still grow. It just might take a little bit longer. But y'all, here's the beautiful thing about this. One of the many benefits of comfrey is that it is a dynamic accumulator. They get a lot of medicine out of that. So you planted them, what's the distance here? It looks like about 2 feet between these two.
Yeah, I planted, it's not anything consistent throughout, because I was really just looking for softer spots to plant them. So some of them are even 4 feet apart, and some of them are down the hill a little ways.
Among all the other benefits that we've talked about ad nauseum is that those roots, those comfrey roots, are basically going to go through, they're going to put down a really serious, deep roots, and they're going to break up a lot of that compaction out here. But here's what else is going to help break that compaction up, is using the animals and their manure and their carbon to help court all the fungal things that we want in this soil. I mean, you see all these wood chips? Yeah. What's the reason this is rotten? The reason it's breaking it down is because we're working with the fungal layer out here. And let me tell you what else you're noticing. All that Chinese silvergrass that you see over there is not, by and large, making its way over here, because we've gone from a bacterial system to a more and more and more fungal dominant system. And we're going to talk more in the future how we make it so.
So another thing the comfrey is going to do is bring in worms and roly-polies. Whenever William and I dig up comfrey, you see all of these, even inside the root, there's earthworms. So it's going to bring life to your soil also.
Well, it's adding more to that soil food web, which we'll talk about more in the future as that unfolds. But really, if you're dealing in a place, and we're covering a lot of this, because one of the biggest emails I get, and there's a lot of them that we get, is, hey, I just came to this ground. I got it because it was cheap. It was all I could afford, but it is absolutely, positively covered with thorns, thickets, briars, brambles. We're new to this. That's why we're spending so much time talking about that, because a lot of people are dealing with this right now, because we have, like Joel Salatin says, record numbers of people leaning into this homestead tsunami because they see the signs of the times. They see what's happening in the grocery stores. And it's things like the comfrey and good technique, good management, looking at these great leaders out there like Joel himself, Greg Judy, Jim Garris, all the others we've talked about, Dr. Elaine Ingham, which we're taking a lot of her stuff to use right now. Look, y'all, the solutions are out there, and they don't necessarily have to involve you entirely. We use our animals as best we can to clear those areas. Look in the previous video where we're using the rams up on the side of the mountain. We are making enormous progress by partnering with them, okay? So y'all, look, we're gonna cover more of this in the future, and we're gonna take you for a ride of this transformation of what is happening, not only here, but out in the pastures, using very good sound methods and techniques, and basically using our animals as partners to make this thing happen in record time. All right, y'all, if you need anything from us, Comfrey, world's best deer repellent, bone sauce. And I want to thank all you folks out there leaving me messages about the wonderful things this bone sauce is doing in your place. Thank you so much. It's a lot of work to make that stuff, and I thank you for all your support out there. And EMP Shield, anything y'all need, y'all, we got it down below. Check us out at the website. Until next time, this is Billy and I almost called her by her real name, Michelle. This is Billy and the Homestead Honey, aka Michelle, from Perma Pastures Farm, where permaculture is my passion, and it's hers too. And right here, y'all, is the reasons why. We'll see you next time.